Hey, here we are talking about coaching. My name is Yannick. As always, I'm here with Sivash and Nikki. Yeah, guys.
Hey, hey.
Interesting question today, which is it came out of a group, one of my kind of alumni groups of coaches, and somebody shared that they find it really exhausting to listen for long times. Somebody else mentioned that they get distracted while they're listening. Right, so there's especially got some resonance from the kind of ADHD coaches out there. It's just like, well, my mind wanders as I'm trying to be really present with someone, and particularly that happens like I opened a conversation about how many coaching sessions can you have before you start getting distracted, not because of how your brain works, but just because you've been listening so presently and so deeply for some time. Right, and some said they can do 6, 7, 8 sessions a day. For some said I never book more than 3. So that was certainly one of the discussions. But yeah, curious what you think, and particularly about your experience of listening and the kind of listening fatigue, maybe we might call that, or the tendency to kind of wander off. Curious what your thoughts are, what your experience is.
Well, my first thought was like, well, thank God it's not just me.
That's what somebody else immediately responded in that group too.
Yeah. No, I think for me, and I think, well, I haven't done official tests, but I've done a few online tests. I got ADHD as well. For me, I get easily distracted. What I found really useful is I have an iPad now, so when I'm making notes, sometimes I'll just scribble or draw something while I'm listening. But I think also for me, it's being useful to reflect on my relationship with the client or what the client is bringing. And there's times I think, and there's not always, and this is not from a place of judgment. So if you're listening to this and you're an old client, there's no judgment. But I think it's really sometimes when it's for me, it's about what we're working on, and I'm like, oh, okay, like I notice just my presence fading. Right, there's times where there's just external things. Maybe I didn't have enough rest, enough sleep, or enough breaks in between. But most of the time for me it's just around like, oh, there's a connection, like. And there's times where I've brought it up and I've said, like, I remember once someone um shared their goals for half an hour, and I just said, like, I don't know, it's like it didn't really connect with me. Like, I just noticed myself getting distracted or less you know losing focus. What do you feel? What's come up for you? And in that case, she was like, yeah, actually this is not what I want. This is just someone else. These are my parents' goals. What I really want is something completely different. And then all of a sudden, there was an emotional charge. There was a shift. But yeah, so that's sometimes that's happened a few times. And then there are other times I think it's just.
Sorry, can I just underline that, because I think it's so important, right? When you find yourself getting distracted, when you're not usually distracted, that's something to pay attention to. We had a different episode about that. Generally that's use of self in coaching. When you notice I'm getting distracted, sidetracked, I'm getting bored, impatient, and I don't know myself like that, then that's interesting to pay attention to and potentially share with the client, right? Because in that case, a perfect example, I'm not really feeling connected to this. And yeah, because I'm not feeling connected to that. It's like, so I picked up something that's already in the room. It didn't belong to me. I just picked up on your relationship with your goal, and I named it, and you resonated with it, and that allowed us to move beyond it. This is such an important thing, right? And it has nothing to do with this is my eighth coaching session, and that's why I'm getting distracted, or this might just be my ADHD brain, or you mentioned something that reminded me of something I really need to do by the end of today, and I had forgotten about it. That's a different kind of distraction. You want to focus yourself back and maybe not share that with the client. But that's a perfect example of how your experience might be something that is in the room rather than originating from you yourself.
Yeah, yeah.
Thank you, Sevash.
Yeah, and I think it's important to keep some attention on the inside and really look at what is showing up. And by the way, like, me sharing I have ADHD, like 90% of the time it doesn't happen, and that comes from actually really working. One is I've worked a lot on outside of the coaching sessions on making sure my nutrition is good, my workouts on point, I'm rested, right? But on the other side, it's also working with people usually that they're working on things that are really meaningful for them. And it's not about how big the project is, but it's often around the way they show up when they're talking about what they're talking about. For one person, it's whether it's a relationship is breaking down and it means so much to them. For another person, it's maybe transitioning out of their job.
Nikki, what say you?
Interesting. Yeah, love what you guys are sharing. I made some notes on this beforehand, and the naming it was definitely on it. So I think, yeah, that's a really powerful tool to kind of utilize your own feelings in that situation. What just came to my mind, which I hadn't actually written down, is like, I'm an avid Audible listener, and that's not just because it's a practical way for me to listen to books, but at some point, and it was during COVID, very consciously made the decision that would be such a good way of training my mind to like remember more. So I tend to read like a lot of my coaching books and like philosophy or psychology books all on Audible. And, that's quite like dense contents. And I would stop and just make sure I could like to take notes. I would stop, pause and talk it back into the phone. So kind of mirroring the words. So I think like, and this is now 3 or 4 years and I've read like hundreds of books through Audible that way. And I think, yeah, like now I can even like drive and listen to things and kind of audio record notes at the same time. So I think, there is insofar as you can train for this kind of thing, I think listening to podcasts are Audible and somehow also like making sure you're paying attention by taking notes and seeing how much of the words you can audio talk into your note. That's one technique I've been using. I think it works quite well.
Yeah, that's really good. And that naming reminds me that just a few minutes before a session, just listening in and noticing what sort of stuff is on your mind or in your body or, something that is present for you that you might want to leave at the door. If you take a few minutes before, you might notice, there is a deadline or there's something, or maybe that dispute from earlier or that fight or that email is still kind of wanting my attention and it's unresolved. There's so many things that are unresolved in our lives when we enter coaching sessions. But just taking a few minutes to just acknowledge that. And I often visually put that into my box, my metaphorical box. I put all of my stuff in there, put the lid on, and I move it away from the desk a little bit. And when it wants to distract me, because our box rattles, right? There's still this stuff that needs to get done by the end of the day, or this unresolved conflict or whatever. I often really picture the box like wanting to, like jumping up and down, the kind of lid rattles and, maybe some figure sticks their head out, to look at me. Just, visually putting the lid back on and moving it back into the corner. If it really is my stuff, that quite helps me to just not get distracted. Or in those moments when there is a distraction, just acknowledge it and choose to stay present with your client. Meditation is the best practice that I know that can help you practice that, right? Because it's just a practice of being there and choosing what you pay attention to. And if you choose to pay attention to your breath or to a mantra like Om or any sort of word or a candle or whatever it is, then when a distraction comes and wants your attention, you train your mind to notice that something wants to have your attention and then choose where your attention goes. Stay with the breath, stay with the candle, or go on a train of thought and think about something. But it's your choice and you can practice that and you can get better at that being your choice. So then in a coaching session, when something wants to distract you, you can then choose what to pay attention to. And that's one of the best skills I think anybody can develop.
Yeah, nice. I think it's interesting. You mentioned 3 other things that I'd also put down on my list. One of them, meditation for sure. Then breath, I think, is also a really good one. I think it's also something I actually do with my surf students before we go in the water, use breathing. Because breathing is a really powerful way not only to kind of bring yourself back to the presence, because you just connect your breath, whatever your pattern is in the moment, but actually the breathing itself has the opportunity to calm your nervous system and help you refocus. So breathing, I think, is really great. But you also said visualization, and that's really cool because the book I'm listening to, coming back to Audible at the moment, is written by a psychotherapist, and he actually described a situation with his clients and how he would leave sessions feeling really drained, which I think is probably quite common in that realm of work and in ours as well, because you're giving so much and also absorbing other people's energy. But he spoke about this visualization he started doing and how it really powerfully affected his ability to be present for his clients. And what he said is like, he kind of now visualizes before the session this kind of bubble around him, like a transparent bubble, and that's kind of his boundaries. And he even like visualizes water, constantly running through the outside of that bubble and just kind of washing, it away. So the bubble is clear, so he's taking in the information, but he's also kind of protecting his energy a bit more. And he said since he's done that, he's found that really effective. So I think for exhaustion, that could really work. For distraction, I don't know, visualization, I think could be a powerful tool as well.
Yeah, cool.
Yeah, I love this discussion. And I think one of the things is that, as coaches, especially as professional coaches, we have to see, I think it's really useful to see ourselves as like professional athletes. Like you talk about meditation, talk about breathing, me, like when I looked at, like from time to time, I study people that have really excelled in different industries. So if you look at, for example, Michael Jordan, look at Kobe Bryant, right? What really took their game to the next level was when the coach brought in a mindfulness coach, right? So they would be, for example, playing in the NBA final and they would lose one or two times. And it came because there was so much pressure, right? And I think this is here, obviously in the coaching session, maybe there's not so much at stake, but there's a lot going on, right? Like there's things going on in our own life. There's plenty of times that, we cannot plan these things, but it's the
Well,
ability.
arguably, there's a lot more at stake, I would say.
Yeah.
Because people's lives are on the line rather
I was
than
thinking
winning
that,
a game.
Yeah, I guess sometimes it could be, right? Sometimes it looks like, okay. And I think the thing is two things I'm getting from this, right? That thing is useful to bring up is one is we need to practice the skill of listening. And that's really, I think, what I love what Nick is doing there. And it's one by just being in more sessions, I think, but not just being there, but almost like a deliberate practice where we are also looking, right? One of the questions I always ask is like, what went well? What can I improve? And in the beginning, I often would write down, listen more, or, pay more attention. And so just get a little bit better every time. And then there's other ways we can practice listening by, for example, training our brain and mind with audiobooks. There's other ways we can contribute to that skill by practicing mindfulness or meditation. So just being really deliberate around this is not something that grows accidentally.
Yeah. Yeah, and the big point I want to pick up here is the one around responsibility and the weight of that. How many coaches I have in the supervision room who take way too much responsibility for their client's success or progress. And that sort of responsibility weighs heavy on you, which makes it really difficult to stay present and listen at that level. Because if you feel it's your responsibility to create success for this client, then you get distracted by that sort of pressure. Because you're constantly thinking, oh, I want to push things forward, I want to accelerate, I need to provide value, give value. How can I add value here? And then the back of your mind gets distracted, thinking about a book you might recommend, or a piece of advice, or the next powerful question. What is it that would unlock this client's infinite potential, and I am the coach, they pay me lots of money, I need to get to a breakthrough in this session. Oh my god, it's 15 minutes left, I still haven't got a breakthrough. So that sort of pressure really, really fucks with people's ability to listen and be fully present. So no wonder you're getting distracted by that. So when there's that kind of distraction, I want to feel into that and explore a coach's relationship with responsibility, what their role is, what has been agreed with a client, what's been contracted, what is the purpose and maybe your hidden agenda as a coach for this client. Do they remind you of someone else? How come you're so involved? Maybe more than is helpful for this client. So exploring the roots of what that distraction is super helpful when people find themselves easily distracted or, distracted with a particular client, or is that a general theme? There's so much to learn when we tune into our experience of getting distracted in coaching sessions.
What it just made me think, like, it's so true. You're right. Like, especially when you're taking all the responsibility or so much of it, I think your mind tends to default into problem solving mode. Right. And when it's in problem solving mode, it can't be present because, like, it's just like running different scenarios and trying to compute a solution. The other thing it also just reminded me of that I think could be a really powerful tool, to bring yourself back into the session is setting an intention before you start. If your intention is to be present and compassionate and a good listener, and then, the moment you notice you're distracted, if you can have that self-awareness, you just remind yourself, and then hopefully that can snap you back to be back in alignment with your intention. So intention setting, I think, as well as everything we've said already, could be a powerful tool or resource.
Yeah, and that readjustment can really happen in a moment. Right? It's like my visualization of pushing my box a little bit further out or putting the lid back on if it came off. These moments of just kind of recentering. I sometimes just have this micro movement of just like, just leaning in a little bit more. And that just tells my body that it's time to go back into the client's experience rather than spending time with whatever was there in mine.
Anything else?
I think I'm out.
Yeah.
Sivash, anything else?
Yeah, just one.
You usually have another nugget.
Usually
Bonus.
one more thing, right? I don't know where I saw this. I think I have it somewhere in my laptop. But I had an assessment. I think I got it from one of my coaches, and in different areas of you as a coach. And in terms of listening, I think we can actually just give ourselves a number. I don't exactly remember how it was classified, but you could, for example, say like a 1 out of 5. A 1 could look like, while the client's talking, I'm checking my email. That's my like level of listening.
Oh.
Right? Right? Or I'm just literally getting distracted. And I know this has happened to me 5-6 years ago, but I'm like, client's talking, I'm like, well, let's just check WhatsApp, right? And that's a good indication of like, I'm completely not present and I'm not listening. And 5 is maybe like where I'm fully listening and I'm hearing what's said between the lines, and I'm picking up, like we said earlier, maybe picking up even some feelings that are being, that are connected to the words. And so we maybe just can create our own version of that, but really like assessing for like, where am I? And what could be really useful is to bring it to a supervisor or a coach. But again, like this intentionally assessing and then intentionally making some, thinking about how can I progress? How can I get better at this?
Yeah. How can I get to the next level of listening? Because, you could say I'm distracted and I'm only listening at level 2 or 3. And I want to consistently listen at level 5. So I think that's adds a whole nother layer.
That's nice. I like that.
Levels of listening are a whole nother conversation. Maybe we keep that here, because then I think we can squeeze in another episode today. So I would quite like that. So yeah, thank you everybody. I'm curious about other suggestions of what you do to refocus or to get yourself in a state where it's most likely that you're listening fully throughout. Hive Mind, let us know what helped you. Let's share the knowledge. It's a win-win situation. It's not a zero-sum game, right? Because knowledge can be given. You don't lose it when you give it to someone else. So yeah, let's share. Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for being with us today. I appreciate your commitment to learning and growing as a coach. Just a few things before you go. First of all, we're doing this for you. So if there's anything you'd like us to talk about, do send us a question. Secondly, we're not doing this for profit, so we rely on your support to help us reach as many coaches as we can. So if you can send this episode to a friend or tell a fellow coach about what we're doing here, maybe you can subscribe or leave us a review or even support us on Patreon. That would be amazing. And lastly, you can find us across all major platforms. So whether you like to watch or you like to listen or you like to download episodes and listen to it in your car while you're driving through somewhere with no internet, you can do so too. And that's it from us. Thank you, and I hope to see you next time.